Hey everyone, welcome to my realistic lip tutorial. This video is kind of long, but it may seem fast once I go through it, so the full-length version is on my Patreon if you choose to support me. Alright, the first thing I'm doing is drawing a plus sign in the middle of my page. You can approach this however you want. This is what works for me. I like to center my Cupid's bow in the middle of this graph. If you don't know what that is, it's just that little dip at the top of your lips. Some people don't have that though, so you don't have to draw it. All lips are kind of like fingerprints, which is really cool. They're all different and they're all beautiful in their own way. So I'm drawing slightly opened lips, and you'll notice that the line doesn't go straight across. It kind of curved up, and then I drew another separation to define the bottom lip. And then I left that little gap where the mouth is slightly open. Before I discuss shading and how to go about that, let's just do 2 quick tips. Sketch very lightly, and I would suggest using a knead eraser to slightly tap your sketch after you do it. This will lift it quite a bit. It'll make it visible to your eyes, but it won't be very visible after you do your coloring. I chose a red pencil just to blend in with the skin tones even more. You can do whatever you want though. The next thing I'm going to suggest is that you sharpen all of your pencils. For realistic drawings, you're going to want very, very sharp pencils to get into the grain of your paper. You'll notice here that I began my coloring process with a very dark brown pencil, but it hardly shows up to your eye when you look at it. Well, that is because it's so important to press pretty much as light as possible as you go about coloring this. So what did you just get yourself into? Pretty much a really long process of layering and layering. So why am I doing that? Let's talk about this first, and then I'll talk about techniques behind it. It's important to layer with colored pencils because if you press hard right off the rip, you're going to form that waxy layer. And once that builds up, it's very hard to build on top of that. The grain in the paper is pretty much filled with your colored pencil pigment, and it's really hard to layer on top of that once the texture is gone from the page. When I say grain, I'm talking about the tooth in the paper. It's just those little bumps. Now that I've laid down a couple of colors, I want you to look at how my hand is moving. I'm not coloring in one direction. Instead, I'm coloring in the direction that all those little wrinkles go in your lips. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I want you to take a break and look at your lips in the mirror. Get uncomfortably close and just look at all those wrinkles. We have tons of them. And in order to convey that when you're drawing lips, you have to do your shading in the direction that all those go. You can't just do horizontal shading and hope it will look realistic. All those little lines make a huge difference. So what I'm doing now is layering pinks and browns and different tans and yellows to convey all of these lines. And what these layers are doing is they're creating definition with those little crevices in your lips, which create the wrinkles. And then later I'm going to go in and bring out the highlights. You'll notice I keep doing a lot of layers with really dark brown. So you might be thinking, wow, that's going to be a little too dark in the end, don't you think? You're going to want those dark colors later because, as I said, those crevices in your lips need definition. And if you want that three-dimensional look, like your lips are kind of coming out of the page, you're going to want that dark color underneath. So I'm kind of building up the foundation for that at the beginning. That way later on, it's not hard. At this point in time, I would also recommend you do not touch your white colored pencil. Just leave that be. It might be tempting to touch it because things look a little dark right now, but don't do it. Wait until the end. We'll get there. If you feel overly tempted to use your lighter colors, you can totally just hide those pencils from yourself. Sometimes I do that and it really helps. Now I'm going in and I'm just building up darker brown colors. I know, right? Kind of crazy. It's going to start looking really dark in a minute. And that might seem kind of weird to you, but that's okay. Now, let's talk about colors, though. Now that we're on the topic of making these too dark or too light, this is where people can kind of just get freaked out. They think they're messing up their lips. I'm going to challenge you and say, no, you are not. These super dark colors that I just laid down will be covered up later by many layers of lighter colors, and it'll be okay. But right now, I just have to take the time to draw all those lines, because if I don't do it right now, it's going to be hard to build that contrast later. So that's what I'm doing, and it's going to look like a mess. It really is. But just bear with me, have patience, and just keep doing your layers. This is where it's very important to have sharp pencils, though. With all of these little lines that you have to create, it's important that you really get into the grain of the paper. So if you have a very dull pencil, it's going to create a lot of blank spots where the paper will keep showing through. You'll want to keep pressing harder, but what it's going to do is just kind of seal off what you've already pressed on, and then that part will get the waxy layer, and it'll be hard to get down into the tooth of the paper and cover everything. So it can become a mess. At this point, you might be thinking, all right, it's cool that she keeps talking about layering these colors, but how do I know what color to make my lips? Remember at the beginning of the video how I compared the shape of lips to a fingerprint? They are all different and beautiful in their own way. The color of people's lips are also very different and beautiful in their own way. Whether you're drawing different ethnicities, or a very young person versus a very old person, the colors in your lips will vary. If you're drawing a woman who is wearing makeup, she might be wearing plum-colored lipstick or very bright red lipstick. These colors, I think, are very open to what you decide. You don't have to do what you see everybody else doing, or maybe what you see in your mind as the only option for lip colors or something like that. I don't know if you know, I'm just ranting now. But look closely at your reference photo or at your own lips, if that is your reference, and kind of decide for yourself what tones you see. Do they have more red lips? Are they more of a desaturated mauve? If it's an older person, their lips probably won't be as red as a younger person. For instance, somebody in their 80s or 90s, they might have very light colored lips. But if you look at a toddler, their lips might be very pinkish red. It all depends. Even if a person is dehydrated, for instance, their lips might be very bright. Or if their lips are chapped or something. So it all depends, and you can kind of look at your reference and decide, okay, is this very bright? Sometimes what you can do is upload your image onto the computer and use that little eyedropper tool and pick out the dark tones and the light tones and just kind of color them to the side in like a drawing program, and you'll get a good representation of what colors are actually used in the lips. In a nutshell, I think lip color is very forgiving. The shading is what really makes or breaks the piece. So you'll see here that at this point, a lot of color has been built up. I'm using the same technique every time. I'm just sort of coloring in the direction of the lips. And as I build and build up the layers, I go from dark to light. I do usually have like 2 pinkish tones that I use consistently throughout, and those are like my constants, but aside from that, I work dark to light. So I would suggest picking some of your own constants for your lip color, kind of using that as your base. I kind of did a really bright pink and like an orangey corally color. You probably saw me use those a lot. After I built up my layers, going in the direction of all the wrinkles, I also did very small circular motions just to get into the grain of the paper. That might sound confusing, but still try to go in the direction of the wrinkle. I don't want to ruin all of these little crevices and wrinkles by just shading like vertically or horizontally in one direction. After that, I just kind of keep adding and adding layers until I don't really see little specks of paper showing through anymore. As I said, this is a very, very tedious process. It takes a lot of building. And then after you go from dark to light, you have to look at it and think, is there enough contrast? Well, let's go back to darks, add some darks. So the process sort of repeats itself at that point. But the layering is so crucial, and I have to keep stressing that because I feel like to draw lips with colored pencil, you have to just keep building the color. Something that I didn't mention earlier is the color of my paper. I actually chose a skin tone color paper with this, and that was by coincidence, honestly. But thinking about it, it's really helpful because if anything does show through, it would be that color. You don't have to do colored paper if you don't want to, though. Some people use like blue or green or whatever. Colored pencil is really nice when you want to use other colors of paper because it's just easy to layer on top of those colors and the colors just kind of disappear, but you can make it show through if you want. Canson makes really good colored pencil paper, so I'll just throw that out there. You'll see here, I'm coloring outside the lips too. That might seem weird because this is a lip tutorial, but I wanted to show you a rough idea of how to shade around your lips too, because lips kind of pop out of your face. They are three-dimensional. So the highlights and shadows around your lips really play a crucial role in making your lips appear realistic and three-dimensional. Usually right below your bottom lip, you might see a little bit of a highlight if it's a fuller lip and then a sharp shadow. If it's a thinner lip though, you might not see that highlight at all. You might just see a little bit of a shadow. That also depends on your light source though. I am just assuming this is like straight on in my picture. But if your light source is elsewhere, those shadows can change. So pay attention to that. Usually at the top of your lips by your Cupid's bow, there's also a little bit of a highlight because that part comes out of your face. Now, again, it could be different with the light source, but assuming that it's directly facing my lips, that's what I'm going with here. Let's quickly talk about highlights. I did a very light yellow, a very light skin tone color, and my white colored pencil. I built that up until I didn't really see it build up anymore. And now I'm taking titanium buff and I am just doing a couple of extra highlights. So what titanium buff is it's like a high flow acrylic, and mine is the Golden brand. You don't have to use this though. This is just something I thought was fun to use. But again, this is a drawing, so if you don't want to include that, you don't have to. You can stop at the white colored pencil. A lot of people use acrylic paints though to add the extra white highlights and the glossy effects. I'm just going to warn you though, it's easy to go overboard, so be careful. You'll notice I'm taking my finger and kind of lifting it after I put it down because I don't want to have too much highlight going on. That can ruin the realistic effect of your lips. If you look at the opening of the mouth, in the very corners of both openings, you'll see like a little white dot on the corner of each. That is to show that these lips are slightly wet. My reference was like that, and I just thought it was really cool, so I wanted to show you and tell you about it. If this was too fast of a tutorial, you are more than welcome to support me on Patreon, where I will be featuring a full version of this tutorial. I will leave a link to my Patreon down below in case anyone is interested. Thanks so much for watching. I hope it was helpful for you. If you're new to the art family, feel free to subscribe. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.